also think very hard and work very hard on how people make a living in that landscape and how communities can thrive in that landscape. So I guess, Paul, I did pull together a couple of slides, which I'll beam up just to give you all something to look at other than me in a box. Can you all see that? Thumbs ups? Yes, all right. So just a little window dressing as I introduce myself and get into some of the things Paul asked me to talk about. So that's the center's mission. This is the town of Lancaster in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, where we do a lot of work. But again, we're really focused on, we have a tagline, live the new forest future. So thinking about what is the future forest economy of this place? And again, how are we making sure that we're thinking about people, economy, and the landscape in that? This is the Northern Forest. When I use that term, this is what I'm talking about. It's 26 million acres of forest across 4 states. It actually goes over through the Tug Hill Plateau over in your direction, 740 miles plus or minus west to east, home to just over 2 million people and many, many small communities. And what really defines this region, or first define the region, is its historic reliance on forest products industries. This was the wood basket of the Northeast, the birthplace really of the global, the modern pulp and paper industry. And it was the forests of this region that built most of the East Coast's largest cities after European settlement. So it's a region that's really unified by a shared economy, many shared cultural connections, and today by a lot of shared demographic and economic development issues, concerns, and opportunities. So just a quick, I think to kind of lead into what Paul asked me to chat with you about, when the center was first started 22 years ago, it was kind of at the height of a pretty massive change in the pulp and paper industry across the Northern Forest. I'm guessing many of you are familiar with this, lived through it, or have heard about it, but dozens of large mills across the region, many of which, it was not unusual for a paper mill to employ 4,000 people, closed in the span of a couple of decades, really in response to global market changes and other factors. And that has led to an economic transition that the region is still dealing with today. And so for the first part of our organization's history, and why I have some background in forest products, we were really focused on the forest products economy and kind of thinking about reinventing that, working with wood products manufacturers to innovate new products, strengthen their business models, working on wood energy markets, doing a lot with recreation and tourism. And we still do those things. But in more recent years, we found ourselves talking about bigger issues that go well beyond the forest products economy that have to do with the demographics of the Northern Forest and of rural places all over the country. This is a map, and I think, is that you all? All right, good. It's always hard when I use these maps. I make sure I know, like, where should I point? And folks don't always know themselves. So, but this is a map of population trends over 3 decades across the region. And, red are places that have lost population during those 3 decades. Yellow are, experienced some up, some down. And, the greens are either stable or growing. But even growing is relative. It might not be massive growth. Most rural places in the Northern Forest and nationally have seen population decline, particularly in the age 25 to age 45 demographic. So we found ourselves talking a lot about this.
Good.
Yeah, did someone have a question? we found ourselves talking a lot about this, for example, with wood products companies who might have a great product, a great business, but they were struggling to find workers. And not skilled workers, just bodies. Like, we need people to come work in our mill. And we started to see it in terms of families who were potentially interested in moving to the Northern Forest or wanted to stay in the Northern Forest, but their schools had been consolidated, or there was no longer a maternity ward anywhere near them. We started to hear, and we started to see, school populations decline. And so we started to think a bit more broadly than just the forest products economy, and think as an organization about some of these bigger issues and a need to really expand our thinking beyond the idea that simply a vibrant forest products economy would lead to a vibrant region. We kind of realized that hypothesis wasn't working. So it's led us organizationally into a set of other issues, which Paul also wanted me to talk about, which are working with communities like yours who are thinking very intentionally and proactively about your future, who are wrestling with some of these issues and really kind of diving in to try some things, particularly on this issue of how do we again make communities in the Northern Forest attractive, particularly to that age 25 to 45 demographic. So again, just these are the three big areas of work that the center's involved in. The forest economy, we work on wood heat, we work on wood products manufacturing, mass timber, as Paul mentioned, and we also include recreation in the forest economy. We work with specific communities on a set of what we call community revitalization activities, which we'll talk about, but that's broadband, downtown development, housing, recreation. And then a little less directly, but we do, as I said, we are a small C conservation organization in some ways, realizing that, the forests are a huge asset for this region and for the globe. And particularly for communities thinking about community economic development, we have a model, for example, where we help communities take ownership of local forests, not to put a fence around them and preserve them, but really to manage them for forest products, manage them for recreation. How do we really leverage, again, small C conservation into an asset for the region? So I'm gonna stop sharing there. And Paul, I thought I'd just talk quickly about forest products. Pause, we can chat a little bit, and then we can get into other community issues. I know you all, I'm sure, got a lot of information from John. I think what I would offer, and this is probably going to repeat some of what he said, but as we look at markets for wood and wood products across that whole Northern Forest region, this is what I see. There's still, the traditional markets for saw logs, both hardwood and softwood, for pulp, which, you all have IP and Finch still operating, and then lower grade material like wood chips, which more recently over your way have gone into, wood electric, power facilities, and into wood pellets. Those are, those markets have been around for a long time and they're still here. They have not gone away, but they are definitely highly variable. I don't know if it reached over your way, but there was a pretty spectacular explosion at a pulp mill in Western Maine back in April. Miraculously, no one was injured. And because that, I can say there's kind of a funny video, if you Google this, of a very typical Maine Woods logger sitting in the cab of his truck who filmed this thing. And if you don't mind a little colorful language, it's a pretty entertaining little video. If you Google J Maine pulp mill explosion, you'll pull it up. But funny video aside, that in 5 seconds took away a market for 1.7 million tons of pulp a year. And that market is gone for at least 2 years and maybe permanently if the company that owns that pulp mill decides not to rebuild that facility. That's the latest example. 4 or 5 years ago, there were 5 pulp and paper mills all in Maine, which closed down within the span of 18 months. And that took out markets for 4 million tons of wood annually. Over your way, the company Re-Energy, which runs a couple of biomass electric facilities, has struggled, has had to close some of their plants. Those are important markets. And we've all heard about what paper markets have done recently. Toilet paper, was a great play for a while. Cardboard boxes remain an extremely strong market because we're buying everything online. But office paper has tanked because no one's going to their offices anymore. So again, we can go into more of this if John didn't cover it, but the point I want to make is that these markets are highly volatile, and we thought we were getting to a good place, and then the last couple months have put us right back where we were. So that doesn't change. So in addition to those traditional products, there are new ones like mass timber, which is largely a Western, Canadian, and European product at this point. A lot of people working on trying to make it a US product as well. There's some other cool building products like a wood-based insulation replacement for fiberglass and foam insulation panels that a company in Maine is trying to get off the ground. And then, as you all have heard about, it sounds like there's always fuel products, bio-refined products, the potential that wood-derived chemicals can replace liquid fuels, helicopter fuel, someone was making that a couple of years ago, or that it can be refined into substitutes for plastic as well. So those are out there. What I would say in terms of what, if you're thinking about, how do wood products fit into the future of your community and your region, the things that we look at to assess are both start with your timber inventory and your wood supply, and the existing demands by sector. Who's taking the wood now? Where's it going? The supply chain infrastructure, that's the ability to move wood and then move wood products to markets. Related to that is transportation, which is primarily in this region is road and rail. I guess you guys might have some shipping by water. Power access and cost is a big one because this is a very energy intensive industry typically. Broadband internet and also cell phone coverage. Labor, or their workers. The regulatory framework. And then also just an inventory of sites. What do you have in terms of existing facilities, sites, either greenfields or brownfields? But also think about co-location, where there's a lot of efficiency gained when wood using businesses co-locate, because the chips, for example, that are a waste product for a sawmill are the primary input for a pellet mill or a wood shaving business. So we often see that as an opportunity that sometimes will help you spot some ideas. So Paul, I'm going to stop there, and you can redirect me into other aspects around wood products where we can hear from the group.
Thanks very much. I'm on the porch, it's a little bit windy, so please someone let me know if that's impacting my audio. Joe, thank you very much. I thought that was a really great intro. And again, where we talked with Joe, where we talked with John Bartow about a little bit about New York, we were talking about opportunities locally, and we were talking about what things looked like in New York, and I'm hoping that this highlights again the broader connections and the broader connectivity that we have with other communities like ours in a much bigger region. And part of that is both to give us a sense of perspective that we're not alone. You know, I know you guys have heard me say that before, but also to give us a sense that we have other examples that we can look to. So Joe, I appreciate that. We have one question here. Would you please be willing to explain the distinction between greenfields and brownfields? Now, obviously, Newcomb is not necessarily going to be a site that will have a lot of that, but if you would be willing to, kind of just give a quick overview of that, and most importantly, how they can be considered as development sites, that would be great.
So the way I use that is that you know, greenfield is a site that is appropriate, and if there's zoning, you know, zoned for industrial development, but has not been built on prior. Brownfield is an industrial site that has been used previously. Brownfields have a bit of a, you know, they kind of have a bad rap because I think they're often associated with pollution. I don't think that's necessarily part of the definition. Just saying you have an industrial site that's been used before, and often they I mean, in our experience, they coexist. Like there's a town we work with, Millinocket, Maine, that it's their old paper mill site. Overall, you know, it's a 1,200 acre site, but only 400 acres of it were ever used by the Great Northern Paper Mill that was there. So they're looking both at the brownfield, and there's still existing mill infrastructure that's there, and they're thinking about how do they repurpose that. But they're also thinking about their greenfield. For example, in their case, they're trying to get some wood-using businesses back into the old mill, but they're thinking about data centers, fish farms, and other stuff for the greenfields.
All right, thank you. So I think when we as a community in Newcomb, I just want to highlight one of the things that Joe pointed out. He listed the things to do in order to understand what opportunities we might be positioned for and might be able to take advantage of. And he listed off, you know, assess your timber inventory, look at your demand for your current wood yard, wood basket, whatever resources that we have that are currently being purchased and shipped. Most of our stuff is going to Finch or to IP. That's correct. We do have some stuff that's going to Canada. At any rate, so assess your timber, your inventory, your landowners, your demand, transportation systems, power and cost of power, broadband and cell, labor pool, regulatory environment, and the potential for co-location. So when we look at that mix, and this is something that I think we've discussed a little preliminarily, that we want to make a recommendation in the comprehensive plan that kind of an audit, sort of a forest industry alignment audit, I'm not quite sure what we want to call it, or a forest industry opportunity audit. I think what we're going to find, I think we're going to circle around what opportunities we have with the former mine site. When you talk about brownfields and you talk about greenfields, for the kind of infrastructure that we want to see and the kind of development that we want to see, you need to have space. So that's going to wind up being either at the Bunting property on the east end of town, or that's going to wind up at the mine. So I think those things are things that people have begun to think about. And I want to open it up. I'm going to unmute everybody. And I want to open it up to questions related to the forest industry itself and the products. And we can have a little bit of time here before we shift into the next phase of the conversation. So if anybody has any questions, again, tying together things that Joe has talked about. Debbie, I see you. I haven't unmuted you apparently. No, I did unmute you. You're self-muted. There you go.
Okay. All right.
Debbie, it's off.
Yeah, I just wondered if we could take another look at the program priority areas. That slide, that looked like it had a lot of really interesting information on it, but it kind of went too fast for me to get everything.
Yeah,
everything.
Beaming it back up now.
And the other thing,
yeah.
So just quickly, Debbie, before you transition into your question, I just want to highlight to everybody that I am recording this today. So we are going to have a recording of this evening's conversation that will be available for a week or two. And then, or actually I'll download it and have it archived, but it'll be available to everybody else on the
Okay.
web for about a week or two. And then also, Joe, if you're comfortable, I will ask you to, if you'd be willing to share the slides that you've presented tonight, if that would be okay.
Yeah, happy to.
Great. Deb, go ahead, please.
All right, so, you know, each of the areas have the goal, the need, and how. Well, how are we assessing the need?
So specific to the forest economy or for all of these?
No, I'm just saying, you know, how in Newcomb do we assess these needs? What are the steps that we need to go through to identify these needs?
So specific to the forest economy, because I have more to share on the community revitalization piece, but I think specific to the forest
Okay.
economy, it's that list that that Paul just ticked back through. And I will say we're actually doing a regional. I pulled that list from the outline of a regional assessment that we're currently doing with the Northeast State Foresters Association, which includes Rob Davies, who's the state forester there in New York. So it's not going to drill down to the level of an individual community, but we're looking, for example, at kind of the Northern Adirondack woodshed, which you all are in. So there's going to be a set of information within the next couple of months
Okay.
that I think would be helpful to you all in terms of assessing some of these, you know, base things. I think an important thing to think about in the context of planning is the scale. Like the wood product stuff can go from, you know, like there's Tupper Lake Hardwoods, not too far from you all. I mean, that's a decent sized operation, but that's not a massive mill. Some of these things, like a wood fuel refinery, like those are massive, or they tend to be massive.
Right.
And it's something I often talk about is like, you know, you can throw all these ideas around, but then you need to actually think, you need to bring it to your place and think about like, would that be appropriate, you know, in our community? And is it realistic to think, you know, specifically to a biorefinery that a company is going to invest $300 million, which is what they can cost, in building a biorefinery in the middle of the Adirondack Park? I would venture that no one's going to do that.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry,
reasons.
Joe. You
Yeah.
said you had more information on community revitalization.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm trying to be good because Paul wanted me to, or we talked about segmenting it, but I'm
Right.
happy to go there as soon as you'll give me the thumbs up or just tell me to shut up and stop talking about trees, and we'll.
The goal, Debbie, and for everybody was really to, we had a very good conversation with John, and I know there was a lot of follow-up questions about, you know, what actually does mass timber look like? What would it be? So I wanted Joe, who's had a lot of experience literally on the ground, and I think you just heard that reflection when he's talking about what it means to build a biorefinery, right? He just put a price tag on that. And he's talking about scale. These are the nuts and bolts that we need to be aware of. And I think for exactly what Joe just said, we can be doing all the fantastic creative planning in the world, but if it's not grounded in what is achievable, then we're not spending our time well. And so where Joe was just able to say, yeah, biorefinery, great, but you're talking about a $300 million investment, and you're going to need to have a whole series of things in order for that to be practical and realistic. None of us want to spend our time, one, making recommendations to the town that are going to be a dead end, or two, trying to attract business that are never going to show up. So we need to align the resources we have, what is reasonable with what is reasonable and practical to see in terms of these efforts. So that's really what I was asking Joe to speak to, Debbie. and everybody. So please, if we have questions about what does it look like to try and have a mass timber plant, what does it look like to try and to promote I don't even know, artisanal furniture production. These are things that we need a sense of scale of. So I would encourage us to ask Joe questions about things that can help inform our understanding of different materials, of different markets, different supply chains. Or if we're comfortable with where we are, we certainly can move on to the community revitalization, because Debbie, I definitely feel your passion and interest, 100%.
Yeah. Yep. That's where I'm heading with this.
Others? And I'm going to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have another question though. But how does all of this? Okay, so yes, my passion is the community revitalization. But any of this, how does it work within the framework of the constraints that the Adirondacks puts on us?
I would say it's challenging. I mean, but you're not alone in that. I mean, Vermont has, for example, they have something called Act 250, which is, again, you know, good intentions. I think it's kind of conserve the Vermont aesthetic, but it has made it very difficult for a number of forest products businesses to expand their operations. Or in the case of one, it burned down and they couldn't rebuild the way they wanted to because of the regulatory framework. And that's why I put it on the list, because it's regardless of your opinions on any of that, it's important to know, because businesses are looking at that. And I am not an expert, I will say, on, you know, all the APA framework. But when you're talking about wood products manufacturing, there's all sorts of issues. You know, emissions are one that come up. And then, you know, obviously scale of development, you know, land use change, things like that. I think though, I mean, wood products, you have wood products manufacturing in the park already. So it's not out of the question. And I do think there are some smaller, you know, more niche opportunities like this wood insulation product. That can be scalable. Like this company in Maine is trying to develop, their vision is a network of small mills spread around, because insulation is a really very light product. So when you transport it, you're essentially paying to transport air. So they want to be as close as they can be to their markets for this insulation. So something like that, you know, and it can be scalable. It doesn't have to be a massive facility. I think something like that might be possible. I think energy uses, both for your own local, you know, any local energy demands, and potentially more broadly, you know, either producing heat to use locally or producing wood fuels to be used elsewhere. These are solid wood fuels, not biorefined products. That's a very scalable model. There's a company in Vermont Wood Pellet. They similarly, their mills are all 20,000 ton a year mills, which is pretty small. So that's I'm diverging from your question, but I think it absolutely is obviously something you have to think about. But I also think that there are scalable opportunities which I think both fit the scale of your community and where you all are in the context of the park, and wouldn't be impossible to think about in the regulatory framework.
Yeah.
Other questions about products or anything related to the forestry side of it before we shift to talking about the community side of it? And I am just looking quickly. We have one new guest who has joined us, calling from 845. Who's that?
Barbara Kearns.
Hello, Barbara. Welcome to the conversation. So are there other questions about the forest economy side before we shift to the community side? Yes, Wes.
This term of big wood has been mentioned both with John's presentation as well as this one. And I can't tell you that I have a distinct understanding of what that is. And if we could get a little more voiceover on that, maybe we could get our arms around it.
Are you talking about mass timber?
Yes,
You got it. Yep.
I think.
Yep. No, that is. So, yeah, I should have, I won't take the time to Google it, but because this is
I'll do
great.
it.
If you have
Joe.
images, but
Yo, this is Paul. Will you do that? I'll pull up some images and I'll share them in a moment.
so mass timber is a whole category of building products. It's not just one thing. It's a category of building products, which, but in various ways, you combine lots of smaller pieces of wood into a bigger structural piece that can carry loads and be used in applications that are basically as a replacement for steel and concrete. So so different types of mass timber, for example, there's one called cross-laminated timber where it's 2x4s. Softwood 2x4s that are put next to each other. You build a panel of them like this next to each other, and then you put another panel on top of that. And you just keep doing that. It's like the old kid game. And they're adhered together into either panels or beams that have tremendous structural strength. There's a much less glamorous version called nail laminated timber, which is what it sounds like. It's that same thing, but instead of adhesive, you just nail it. If any of you have ever used, in construction in your own homes or elsewhere, like an LVL header, laminated, anyway, that's a form essentially of mass timber.
Joe,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna shift real quick, and I'm gonna pull up my screen just quickly, and we'll take a look at a couple while you're talking.
You guys have there's a company, Unilam.
Yep.
I think is in Unadilla. Is that right?
Correct. South Central. Yeah, I've invited them actually to come speak here before.
Yeah, so it actually is. There is a form of mass timber. I think they make they make glue lam.
That's correct.
Which is another form of this stuff.
Right.
But it is made, that is a form of it that's made in New York.
So right here, we're looking at, this is a cross-laminated timber. So you can see these ends are boards that are running lengthwise this way, just like this board is running lengthwise. And then you have boards that are running perpendicular, all right? And they're all put together into a universal piece. And then that piece, those pieces are modular. And so what it allows you to do, as you can see in this picture right here, is you can build an entire structure and you can bring up, is everyone able to see my cursor? Someone put the thumbs up if you can see my cursor. So this is a modular unit. These are all modular units. And the power of this is because the power of this is that your construction time is much lower. The number of individuals that you need involved is much lower. And so you can build buildings less expensively because you have less of a labor cost. And again, you're spending less money on concrete and steel, both of which are non-renewable, by the way. So once we're out of, in theory, once we're out of steel, we're out of steel. Once we're out of concrete, we're out of concrete. And when you drop the buildings, when they're done with their life cycle, you got to figure out some place to bury the steel or bury the concrete. They're very difficult to recover. This stuff, in theory, you can recover. When Joe was talking a moment ago about nails, this is a variation on that. These are dowels that are actually driven all the way through these boards. That's another one of these mass timber products. These are these laminated beams, which are just as strong as steel I-beams. You can see these here. That's what's made down at the Unilam company in South Central New York. They actually get all of their timber from out of state. It comes in on rail, actually. which is one of the reasons why if we can preserve the rail in Newcomb, we have an opportunity perhaps to move our products. Some of the architectural power of cross-laminated timber is it allows you to have an incredibly open floor plan and design. So you're able to see how beautiful these buildings are architecturally, as well as how beautiful they are in terms of a finished aesthetic. You have wood, it's a very warm, natural finish. You're not talking about drywall and painting and a bunch of other materials. So it's both part of the architectural and construction as well as part of the finishing. So it really has a lot of power from an architectural and building perspective. So anyway, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about mass timber. I don't know if we need to go further, but this is a bit about what it looks like. And a place that you can go look locally, go check out the library at Paul Smith's College. They used a lot of laminated wood beams in the construction of it. The body of the building is traditional, but they have a lot of laminated wood beams. All right, Joe, thanks. Run with it.
Yeah, and we could definitely go deep on this. I mean, I'll just say that there's a lot. The wood products industry is pretty excited about this. I think they see it as a market opportunity, but there's some headwinds. I mean, there's not yet real, it hasn't been a huge market uptake for this yet. I mean, there've been some kind of niche buildings, but we need a lot more. Right now, the demand in the U.S. can be met very well with existing suppliers from Canada and even boating it over from Europe. So we need more market demand for mass timber building to really grow markets. And then, as Paul mentioned, right now a lot of the approved species for use in mass timber are ones that grow in the West and the Southeast. Some of our spruce fir can be used, and you all do have that in New York, and Maine has a lot of it as well. This is one that, this is where state policy comes into play. Like Maine is doing a lot as a state to try and recruit mass timber manufacturing to their state.
Right.
So this is one where I'm going to say that this is there is competition to get one of these things. And if I had to bet on where one's going to pop up first, I would say over in the Maine woods, but that's just me speculating.
All right. Other questions about forest products and forest products economy before we shift towards talking about communities?
I just have one question. How is a timber inventory performed?
That's a great question. So the way we're doing it, which again is across 4 states, is using Forest Service forest inventory and analysis data, which I will not bore you with. What's Paul could probably cover that another time, so I'll let him do that.
Thanks.
That's kind of a national data set that we can use, but depending on the scale, I mean, individual landowners. I mean, landowners are another great audience for you all to talk to if you're interested in this, particularly your larger ones like, lime timber, is it mulpus? They're not just growing wood, they're thinking about what are we going to do with it. And they always have ideas about what they'd like to see. So individual landowners can do like timber, you can do a far more grounded, walking through the woods and doing transects and inventorying that way. And there's some really cool technology developing to do a lot of this with remote sensing and drones. So I think that's coming quickly. So the answer to your question really depends on how granular you want to get. For general planning purposes, I would say FIA data that's the Forest Service forest inventory analysis data would probably suffice.
Yeah, and this is something that we at ASF have been involved in a lot of this too, using something called LIDAR, which is light infrared photography to look at forests from high altitude, actually from satellites, and you can tell what forest cover type is there and doing some analysis that way. And as Joe mentioned, drones, there's a number of ways to do this. Anyway, it's certainly something that I think we would be wise from the Newcomb side to get a much better understanding of what our regional, what our community, let's say our community forests, who owns them. I mean, we talked about this with Joe. Who owns the land? What are they doing with it? Where's the products going? What's their harvest rotation looking like? What are their primary markets? All right. Joe, we're just coming up on 8 o'clock. Are you comfortable staying for another 15 or 20 minutes?
I am good. I'm not going to let Debbie down here.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, let's shift towards the community revitalization part. And Joe, just go for it.
All right. So yeah, I'm going to screen share again. Get it to work. Hang on. Try that again. I'm getting there. Give me a sec.
No worries.
Okay. No, I'll start over. All right. So the how on this slide is lists a lot of stuff, and what I want to talk about is, as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, we've started to work in a couple of specific communities in our service region, town of Millinocket, Maine, which I mentioned, several communities in Western Maine, and the town of Lancaster, New Hampshire, where we've gotten a lot more involved at the community level in working with local partners on the conditions that they see as necessary for growing their community in the way that they want to grow it. And that's what, in a lot of ways, has kind of generated the list that's on this slide. And I wanted to get into a little bit more detail in terms of things that we have found useful to look at. Important pieces of information to support these conversations about, the future of a place. And so I thought I'd just kind of share this general list and then talk about a couple of our specific community projects, which actually then start to work on some of these issues. So we start with assessing just some basic, demographics. It's important to understand what's happening in terms of population in a place. The village center or the downtown, what general shape is it in? Is there evidence of recent investment? How's your occupancy? Do you have your core anchor institutions? Is there a committed downtown group? Just trying to get a sense of that, because you all know, your downtown, your core, a lot grows from that. Education, as I mentioned, this is something that, particularly families are going to be thinking about. And what's going on in the schools in terms of enrollment trends, being honest about, the quality of the education being provided and any challenges there, and how committed is the community, elements of government, how committed are they to funding schools. Employment, again, just basic data, but who are your major employers? Who are your new businesses? What's their experience been? What's on the horizon? Financial and fiscal resources, the state of the budget, is it stable? We have found discretionary spending to be kind of a good proxy. For example, we looked at all the major population centers in the northernmost county in New Hampshire. And you could tell a lot by kind of the status of the water and sewer infrastructure in terms of which communities had kept up with that and which had not, as a proxy for, the community investing in itself. Healthcare, again, a big one. How close is it? What are the trends? Housing, I know Paul mentioned to me that this is one you all are thinking about, real estate trends, and really we've found a need to focus a lot on housing quality. In a lot of places, it's not so much quantity, although that really can vary. But there tends to be, I'm generalizing here, there tends to be a lot of low quality housing available. But if you're talking about attracting new residents or workers for businesses, that's not going to cut it. It needs to be quality housing. Infrastructure, I mentioned already in terms of the basic infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, and the commitment to maintaining it and not getting too backlogged. Recreation and amenities, what are they? Are they appreciated as assets? Are they marketed as assets? What's the community's attitude towards visitation and tourism? And are there organized recreation groups? And then finally, technology, which again, Paul mentioned you all have addressed this, but this is a big one. As the last 4 months have shown us, broadband is not just a luxury, it's really a necessity. And a lot of other things aren't possible without it. So that's a very quick trot through a set of issues, which I know are all familiar to you, but I just wanted to share that framework of thinking is one that we have found helpful to bring to the table in terms of a set of issues to think about. And then just two quick examples of where we're, based on those assessments and working with community partners and what they see as opportunities that they want to act on, and then challenges or gaps that they want to address. Two examples. This is an overhead of Lancaster, New Hampshire. It's a town of a couple thousand in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and a set of projects that we collectively identified with local leaders and have begun to work on. The big one I would mention is this Parker J. Noyes building redevelopment, where we actually purchased with another downtown property owner, a very large 3-story historic building right on the main street that was vacant, and are now redeveloping with some impact investment funds, with some federal grants, historic preservation grants, and other sources. We've found property redevelopment to be a pretty important need. This is a very high profile building right on their main street. It was going to be hard for that downtown to really, it was kind of a gap in the smile, so to speak. So that property redevelopment we've found to be a big need. Broadband is an issue in this community. They have fiber into their downtown core, but not into the larger areas around it. We're doing a lot with them to do a better job of packaging their recreation amenities. It's not enough just to have some nice trails. Like, people need to be able to find them. You need wayfinding, you need signage. And then I point to this sort of marketing piece up here. We, with local partners, did a survey via Facebook of folks who had graduated from the local high school to understand their perceptions now of Lancaster. And if they weren't living there, why not? What would it take? What would it take for them to consider moving back? And we're using those data and some other things to work with the town on a marketing strategy targeted at some of those high school alums, and opportunities, quality of life, amenities, things like that, to see if they can't bring some new residents into their communities. And then another community, this is in Millinocket, Maine, way up in the Great Woods of Maine. This is a paper mill town. They had the Great Northern Paper Mill, employed 4,000 people. At one point, Millinocket had the highest per capita income in the state of Maine, based on that forest products economy. That was in the 1950s. Now it's lost half of its population. It was 10,000, now it's down to 5. It's no longer the highest per capita income. It's one of the lowest. So it's kind of a quintessential, in the bad way, Northern Forest story. But a similar kind of constellation of activities here based on that community assessment. Here we started with residential property development, so that quality housing piece. There, you could buy a house couple of years ago in Millinocket for $10,000. It wasn't a nice house, but there were a lot of them. And that sort of got to the quantity versus quality. They had a lot of housing, but it was not the type of housing that the hospital CEO wanted to show to his, the doctor he was trying to recruit, or that the school principal wanted to talk about to teachers that they were trying to hire. So again, using some impact investor money. And when I say impact investment, these are individuals for the most part who are interested in, they want a return. It's not philanthropy, but they're happy with a 1 or 2% return on their money for investing in issues and places that they care about. And we found some appetite in that community for this type of quality housing rehabilitation in rural places. Here also similar ingredients, doing a lot with the recreation amenities of this community, which again, it was a mill town. It didn't tend historically did not look on recreation. Recreation was for locals. It was not something they were inviting outsiders in to do. So that's been both a mind shift, in that community, which has been slow, but is happening. But it's also pointed to some infrastructure development that needs to happen. And again, in terms of wayfinding, signage, supporting amenities like places to stay, places to eat, that are necessary for the community to really capitalize on recreation as a basis for attracting people to live there. This is where I totally hate this Zoom format, because I wish I could see you all and kind of gauge where you are, but I'm going to stop and again, Paul, sort of see where you want to go.
I've unmuted everybody. Anybody who is still on mute, it's please unmute yourselves on your end if you have a question. Really, we've just touched the surface on the kinds of things we want to talk about in terms of community revitalization. And I think really what many of us, I think, might respond to is in that list that Joe put up there of the assessment. When you look at demographics, you look at a village center, you look at education, employment, financial and fiscal resources, healthcare, housing, infrastructure, recreation, and technology. If we wanted to establish that as a scorecard and look at Newcomb, I think many of us would say that Newcomb's doing pretty well. There are certain areas in that list, obviously, that are challenging for us. Housing is a key one, and we know that. And obviously demographics is a challenging one as well, but we're not alone in that demographic challenge. It's across rural communities across our nation. So I think it sets up a really good segue to talk about what are similar communities doing that are in our position that are trying to be successful. So I want to put that to the group in order to have you ask Joe questions. And then we can continue from there. And I need to step away for just one moment, please. So you guys take off with the questions. Actually, if someone wants to raise their hand, I'll cue you in first, and then I need to run and check on something. I'll be right back. I see Wes, you have your pencil up. Why don't you start, please, and I'll be right back.
Joe, I don't really have a question for you. I want to thank you for the reinforcement of your presentation as it relates to issues that all of us in rural America need to address or have addressed. I guess I'm comforted to say that outside of the identified opportunities that you have mentioned, we have other very compelling pieces to promote, to bring individuals of youth to the community. I think that's part of what falls into our marketing challenge. And let me share something with you that I got from John's presentation. Is one of the things that he cited was the need for truck drivers. You know, when you have the forest product industry, you know, people aren't like waking up in the morning like they did, you know, decades ago and saying, I want to drive a log truck. However, you know, in order to keep this part of the industry vibrant, we diligently need these types of people in order to perform that task. And those are good paying jobs, you know, so they have the spin-off effect that goes with them as well, that gives you the service aspect of community revitalization. Once again, you know, and we're kind of beating a dead horse on this comprehensive plan. The key ingredient appears to be housing and viable housing. And I believe that you just reinforced that once again. And where housing becomes one of our key opportunities is in the area of having truck drivers. If Newcomb was a destination where people could get an affordable place to live, to raise a family, that put kids in the school, I know this sounds, you know, really simple, however, it's not, that would like satisfy about 3 of the objectives that we have, not as a town, but regionally. You know, like we can never look at this proposition as just us.
Right.
This proposition always needs to be addressed from a broader perspective on how the benefit of the greater good invariably translates to us in the trickle-down theory. However, if we become the catalyst for that enterprise, then we stand to benefit at a higher degree and in an earlier stage of the revitalization. So I thank you for reinforcing the things that we have talked about to date, and realizing that I think we're on track with what we're thinking about, and talking to people like you with a broader experience reinforce that for us.
Thank you, Wes. John, did you have some, Joe, did you have something you want to respond, or I see Debbie has a question as well?
No, I'm happy to, I've talked enough. Happy to hear from you all.
All right, Debbie.
Do you have any model of a community that you know of that the sorry, my dog is budging here, that the revitalization is not so much hinged on a younger population, but an older population?
Yes, I mean, and I think yeah, I'm trying to think. So we were in our board met in Tupper Lake a year or 2 ago, and we met a number of movers and shakers there. I remember I'm sure you all probably know some of these folks. I'm not going to remember her name, but she'd been like a tour manager for Mariah Carey, and retired to Tupper, and brought with her significant resource, significant experience, and was now deeply invested in that community and downtown work. I think we've seen stories like that all over the place, and I think particularly in regions like the Adirondacks, where you guys you have a high percentage of second homeowners, people who have discovered the region, are retiring there or spending a good portion of their time there, and I think tapping into that is absolutely a good strategy. We have focused on the younger demographic, primarily for reasons. I mean, Wes mentioned this, the school population piece. Bringing in families who have kids or may have kids helps with that, and then also the workforce piece. Again, trying to make sure that there are workers for businesses. So it's not intended to be exclusionary, but that's the reason for our focus. But absolutely, there are lots of great examples, and I'm guessing some of you honestly are them, of, people who have brought a lot to invest, in their communities.
Well, I
later.
mean, I ask that because the people inherently who are buying property, building property, whether it be for a second home or hopefully moving into Newcomb full time, are not young families.
Mhm.
They are older individuals, either retirees or close to retirees. So, we need to satisfy their needs, and perhaps, again, revitalization might hinge on this demographics. Yes, it doesn't populate our schools immediately, but they have families, and maybe those families come to Newcomb and love it and decide to move here as well with children. But what I'd like to see, I just would love to see another community that kind of was based on that model, that not so much on the young families. The young families was perhaps the trickle down, but on those retirees coming in and what they're giving back to the community, because yes, they have a tremendous amount of brain power and perhaps monetary power that can really jumpstart a community.
So I see Wes and Beth both want to comment, but I want to give Joe an opportunity to respond. So Wes, I see you. Beth, I see you too. Joe, why don't you respond?
2 quick points. I'd say the Conway area here in New Hampshire is, that's an area where I think they do have an older demographic, and that's a bustling place. So if I were going to point to a specific community or region, I would point there. The second thing I want to say is that a great way we have seen older people contribute in this kind of community revitalization framework is by creating businesses that are amenities that they want for themselves. A good restaurant, a place to get a beer, an interesting retail establishment. And they're doing it not because they're going to get rich. And in fact, we often see that they're subsidizing it. But they're creating an amenity for themselves that makes their community, they're bringing something that they want. But those amenities also are amenities that attract other people, right? I mean, we met a couple in Rangeley, Maine that did this. They had done well for themselves. They opened a brewery and a restaurant. And they were the first to admit, we are not going to make money doing this. But we're doing this because we believe in this community. This is where we have chosen to, spend, the next decade of our lives. And we wanted a place like this to gather. So I would just point at that. That's a way that you can kind of bridge these two. I hate to pit demographics against each other, but that's one way where I've seen that bridge get built.
Thank you. Wes, you've been patient. Thanks very much.
Joe, we kind of have this same dynamic going on right now where in our previous comprehensive plan, we identified 3 distinct variables of gas, food, and lodging. And, probably none of us understand the amount of personal, whether it be money or effort or just enthusiasm that we have sponsored the initiative of some entrepreneurs in town that have facilitated gas, food, and lodging. And I would contend that we have the same dynamic here in Newcomb as a small community, and especially because of this COVID-19 thing. I looked at my credit card bills this past month, or past couple of months. I couldn't believe how many times I ate out at the lodge. And you know what? I'm only one of the people that could say that. We have a full complement of other individuals that ate 3 meals a week in order to keep these people just barely solvent in order to accomplish the objectives that we had as a community.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, my point is, older dynamic, great model, I just can't stress this enough to everybody. And if nobody comprehends this, then they're not listening. We need young people here in order to staff our fire department and our rescue squad. And the only people that can do that are young, strong bodies. All the money in the world can underwrite that, but paying people to do that activity is a solution. You have to have the people in force in order to be able to pay them to do that. And so we cannot lose sight of the fact that we need to bring young people into the community, because we have a tourist economy at this juncture. They're going to get hurt. And the only way we can help those people is through young people assisting them to get to the hospital.
Wes, I would add, 100%. I don't fail to add the medical community as well as the emergency and first responders, but also just the baseline medical community needs. We need young individuals for that, and also for the town highway and general services. Retirees are not going to make the town work.
Yeah, I mean, our medical center is
Correct.
Probably one of the foremost ingredients that we have in terms of a proposition for anybody that moves here. And that's a significant thing. But, the director of our medical center is probably going to retire in the next 5 years.
Yep.
We need to be thinking about how that gets replaced.
Yep.
We need to understand what the staff dynamics are of that proposition. These aren't things that, we're just going to solve tonight. These are long-term, deep dive thoughts and issues that need to be tackled.
Beth, you've been patient. Thank you. You're next. Oh, you're muted. Beth, I think you're muted. You're at least on, we're not picking you up. You're on my control screen. You're not muted.
Okay, all I was going to bring up was that the second home people, one of the things that they do, the retirees, is they bring the money to town, and they're building housing stock that it's probably going to be, by the time it turns over, maybe it's going to be another 10, 20 years. But I kind of think that's one function of, having the older people come here, the retirees, is we are actually getting some quality housing. Then maybe if we could have, in addition to that, maybe if we could develop housing for young people, something that was quality, or fix up some of the homes that are around here, maybe that could kind of bridge the time span there. But I think we have to look at it, I guess, all I'm saying is we have to look at it over a long period of time,
Thank you, Beth. So Joe, I want to put something to you that's, Wes, hang on one second, please. Joe, I want to put something to you that reflects off of what Beth was just saying. One of the things that we acknowledge about our town is that, as Debbie pointed out, there is a lot of second home ownership, and that seems to be the largest trend in terms of a shift in ownership of either vacant land or built lots and homes. But if we're going to be successful in trying to attract people, we need for a range of positions, we need to make sure that we have a range of housing. So we need to have housing that might be attractive to young families that are just starting out. We might perhaps families that are established but want to relocate. And then of course we have the retirees. In order to do that, coming back to your comment about individuals who are willing to invest, who may be at a point in their life where they're not looking for a return on investment, but are willing to make that investment. What is your experience in looking at other communities across the Northern Forest that people have done that around affordable housing?
So that's what we did in Millinocket. We raised $1 million for housing rehabilitation, and we don't use, and that was from impact investors. We don't use the term affordable housing because that has a specific meaning in policy contexts. That's why we talk about quality housing.
Thank you.
And because again, there was no shortage of affordable housing. And we built, I mean, these are apartments. I mean, they're multifamily, for the most part, multifamily homes. We bought a couple of small, single family homes. But the market demographic we were trying to cater to it was a doctor who was, taking a job at the hospital in Millinocket. It was a teacher. It was in consultation with the group that's rehabilitating the mill site, so that they could have, as they talk to prospective businesses who might want to relocate, they could say, if you're going to move your manager here for a year in advance of his or her family, we have an apartment for them. So it really was, because we were seeing same there. Millinocket has a huge second home contingent out on the lakes. Like that stuff was already getting built. That didn't need attention. But what needed attention was this niche of quality. I am going to use the word affordable just in the general. Accessible quality housing that was accessible financially, to individuals and families. And we found good appetite for that. And it was a really interesting mix of people who had very different motivations. Connection to place, connection to region, connection to issue. They just thought it was a cool idea. But we found good appetite for it.
So I want to press on this just a little bit, if I could, please. When you talk about impact investors, these are individuals that you cultivated, and this was largely donor development kind of stuff, or was this organized through? Was there any federal funding, any regional funding? What was the packet that drove this?
These are all individuals, and we offered them. We had a 5-year term and a 7-year term, and 5-year was 1%, 7 years was 2%. And we raised it in tranches of $50,000 to $100,000. And that was the money that we used. We supported our own time to administer the project through, we're a nonprofit, so we can access grants and other things like that. But the cash that went into the property redevelopment in Millinocket was all this impact investment money. So not grants. They're expecting to be paid back.
What I'm getting at is you guys started from zero. You had no seed money. You just started knocking on doors. Outstanding. Wes, I see your hand was up.
I've alluded to this before, and Joe is just reinforcing this. We have a significant complement of people in this community that would underwrite exactly what he is talking about. We need the people who are represented on this screen to be a champion to that effort in order to make that happen. That's it. And if there are other people that have other ideas that are on the 37 member list that you send out, they could make something happen in this regard, because I know we have the amount of capital needed in order to accomplish our objectives. We just need human resources to tie a loop around that in order to make it happen.
Agreed. Roy, thank you.
Joe, this might be a shot in the dark, but have you worked with Habitat for Humanity to build homes, quality?
That's an interesting, we haven't, I'm going to say, one, I don't know if we've thought of it, and two, I'm sure we could attract habit. That's a good question. I feel like we looked at that and I should just say no, we have not done that. But it's a good idea. And I'm just not recalling off the top of my head why we haven't pursued that.
So I want to poke you on another question. Actually, West, were you raising your pen?
Yeah, I think Habitat for Humanity is an interesting idea. That's not the direction that we need to go. We need to have an established investor-based number of people that are willing to underwrite the idea that we have, what is it, affordable or whatever you want to call this housing to accommodate truck drivers in order to propel the wood products industry into the future. And then also a spin-off to that is put kids in our school and make the fire department and the rescue squad viable.
Nice.
This does not require Einstein type of theory. We have the resources within our town in order to accomplish these objectives. We just need a champion to corral those resources, give them a pitch that they can understand, and we'll be well on our way to making this happen. We don't need a town board. We don't need a comprehensive plan. We have the ideas. We need human resources to champion the cause.
Appreciated. Joe, I want to press on something. Not press. I want to open a can of worms. Excuse me. Are there examples of pitfalls that you've seen other well-intentioned communities pursue that have been, unfortunately, there have been unintended consequences, or things haven't gone the way they wanted, or things that you might want to offer us as words of wisdom or as flags and warnings?
I mean, in our own experience, we haven't stepped on any landmines yet. You know, I will say this work, we didn't, I mean, to your last question, Paul, yeah, we did just kind of hatch this housing idea and start moving on it, but that we didn't just show up one day and do that. Like that was based on years of partnership with people in Millinocket through other projects. It was based on listening, and it was based on, you know, real buy-in from town opinion leaders that was something that they wanted to do. I will say that dynamic of, you know, being, you know, recruiting new people. I mean, that can be, that can get dicey, right? You know, if you don't have agreement on that and kind of eyes open as to what it means. I mean, if you're going to be serious about it, it means welcoming new people into positions of leadership in a community. It means being open to people showing up who look different. You know, there's a whole talk about cans of worms. There's lots of them. And we have seen those dynamics play out in unfortunate ways in some communities in the Northern Forest, where there was a well-meaning, you know, effort to bring new people to the community, but not everyone was bought in on it. And it resulted in some unfortunate dynamics. But I would say for the most part, I mean, you all, I think, have affirmed this. This is a reality places are facing. You know, in rural communities is attracting new population. And as long as you're, you know, thoughtful about it and are not getting too far ahead of, you know, the powers that be, you all know who those are, in your community, we haven't run into any major issues in the scale of work that we've been doing on this.
Okay.
Did you have some in mind, Paul, that you were?
No, the diversity one that you're alluding to is a huge one, obviously, and that's certainly a place where I've read about other communities that have worked hard on an initiative and had it really had some pretty tragic outcomes. But I just wanted to, I was, thinking about communities that you might have worked with where you have leaders that just, are just not grounded. Their ideas just aren't grounded in things that are practical. And they've, again, perhaps spent a lot of time and money and failed to achieve their goals for a variety of reasons. So I was just interested in if you had any experiences that you might say, oh yeah, by the way, something to avoid is X, Y, or Z. But I do want to open it up. I know, Wes, you had your pen up, but I'm going to ask, there's some folks that haven't had a chance. Mary Lamphere, Mary Monahan, Barbara Kearns. I wanted to make sure that I created a space for any of you if you had some questions or comments. Want to make sure I bring you guys into the conversation if you have something to share. Hello, Jim. Thanks for joining us. All right, well, Debbie, do you have another question? You're on mute, just so you know. Yep. And then Wes, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, going back to the mass timber, the technology would lend itself. You said a lot of them are pre-constructed modules. Has anyone that you know of, that you have experience of, so you take the segue from the mass timber to create tiny homes? I'm very intrigued by tiny homes. And then segue that again to tiny home, either community segments within your community or some sort of perhaps temporary living or recreational.
So yes, there is, and you don't need mass timber mass timber is for like multi-story buildings, right? So you could, but the cool example to your question, Debbie, there's a company called Vermod in Vermont, VERMOD, that is making zero emission homes. They're not tiny homes, but they're modular. This is not the right, but they're trailers.
Right.
I mean, they're built to be transported on a flatbed truck, but they're zero emissions. They're built with Vermont wood, and they're really nice houses. Like we toured one with our board. They were originally targeting with their product affordable housing organizations, who are going to buy these and provide them to low and moderate income families. What they have found is that the demand for their product is much higher from high-end buyers. Who are they're interested in the environmental, as the zero emissions piece. They're interested in again, it's not a tiny home, but a small home. And I think it's an interesting idea because it does get at both wood products manufacturing, and it's called stick built. You don't need, this is 2x4s. It's not, you don't need a fancy factory to make this stuff. But it does merge, as you're suggesting, wood products, a potential business opportunity, and can help address a need, whether it's for any demographic, right? I mean, for retirees who want a smaller home, or for a young family, or a single truck driver who just needs an affordable home. That model, I know there are folks in Millinocket, the community I've mentioned a couple of times, who I'm talking to on Friday, who are examining this opportunity there as well. It's a good idea.
Other observations? Questions? So Joe, I want to pick up on something that Debbie said earlier and ask you about that. I personally, and I think this is consistent with what some of the things that Wes was saying, I believe that for the community to be successful, you have to be targeting across age groups. You need to be looking at where you can be successful with the more mature retired crowd. You need to have some individuals who are in mid-career, and you need to have some early career people. You need to have young demographics. And sorry, you need to be attracting younger people to positively impact the demographic trends. But having said that, and thinking back to Debbie's comment about, have you seen communities where people have been successful in the older retiree bracket? What are you seeing for communities that have done creative or adaptive re-envisioning of facilities around elder care, around retirement communities, around assisted living, ways to provide housing for individuals to either relocate to a beautiful environment or maintain being able to stay in that environment even when they're not perhaps necessarily as independent as they once were, and using that as an economic driver both in terms of construction as well as in terms of aid and services.
So this is not a topic area that I know a ton about. I'll say that up front. I mean, I do know anecdotally, though, I can think just off the top of my head of 3 different communities that have converted, this goes to, shrinking school population, converted old high schools into assisted living facilities in Berlin, New Hampshire, Millinocket. Also, to your second point, I mean, outside of Whitefield, New Hampshire, there's a very significant new assisted living facility that was constructed a couple of years ago that's now a pretty significant employer, in that community. So it's absolutely a real dynamic because the what I didn't mention in the demographic trends is that this is an aging region, as well. We have an older population than most of the rest of the country. And that's just a reality, and people, for the most part, don't want to leave their home places. But it gets, the other facet of that, though, of course, is then the workforce to staff those facilities. And that, you mentioned that earlier, Paul, in terms of the demand side is there, in terms of, there's a demographic that needs that type of facility. But we've also seen those facilities really struggle to find workforce.
Yeah, we have a real workforce problem. It's a foundational problem to everything we do.
Did I answer your question? I mean, I know it's anecdotes, but
well, I appreciate that, and thank you for being candid about about your experience. But certainly it's part of the mix of things that we're trying to figure out. What can we consider? What should we consider? Right? You talked about that earlier in terms of making sure that the ideas that you pursue are practical and realistic. So there's lots of stuff that we can put on the dream board. But what are the things that we're going to move from the dream board to the action board? And is looking at some kind of a elder community, and maybe perhaps bringing in Debbie's, small homes, and I'm saying small intentionally, not tiny, but bringing in some kind of Vermont style housing community where we can have transitional living for people and have healthcare that comes in and takes care of them when needed.
Yeah, and I think a key thing that we're, in all the communities where we're working, we're trying to pair, a lot of the attraction potential hinges on quality of life. I mean,
Yep.
You all live in a phenomenally beautiful place. It's not for everyone in terms of its, degree of remoteness and rurality, but our belief is that there are enough people in the world who would like to live in communities like yours if they had a job, if there were some basic, amenities, which you all have already, sounds like, you're working on, place to fill your gas tank, place to get a meal, place for your family to stay when they come visit. if there's broadband, which you've addressed, you know, and if the healthcare and education systems are decent. And that's a lot of our theory and what we're working on in these communities is if you put that package of things together and with quality of life, access to outdoor recreation, is that a formula for attracting people? Because what for Lancaster, for example, they similar to you all, they need healthcare workers, they need mechanics. You know, they have a couple auto dealerships and others who they just need some mechanics. You've mentioned truck drivers. So a lot of it is, can we advertise essentially the fact that we have jobs, and not just jobs, like specific jobs. We have these employment opportunities, we have quality of life. We can offer you a housing option, you know, that works for you. We're a welcoming community that wants you here. There will be opportunities for you to immediately participate in the fabric of our community. It's that kind of package that we're working on. And so that would be the last thing that, you know, it's important, we think, to kind of, and that's why I shared that kind of holistic framework, is to think about all of these things together as you all are doing. It's important to focus on individual pieces, but not lose sight of the whole, because our idea is it's that whole package of things is really what leads to vibrancy.
All right. We're coming up on the last few minutes, and I want to preserve a few minutes for talking about our next meeting. But are there any questions, follow-up questions or comments for Joe about any of the things we discussed, either from forest products and future marketing, future markets and economy, to rural resilience? Also, Joe obviously touched on a number of things that we should be thinking about from a planning perspective, and recommendations that we should put into the comprehensive plan that the town pursue. And I say that recognizing that every time I say that, people say, well, is the town actually going to do this? It is the goal of this group to document recommendations that should be pursued. Who actually winds up pursuing those, I think we all agree, will not necessarily be the town board. It will be a self-selected group of individuals, many of whom are sitting right now on this call. So I just want to be absolutely clear that when I say make these recommendations to the town, what I mean is put these recommendations into our document, which will then be approved by town and then acted upon by a group of motivated individuals. So I want everyone to hear me clearly. Hear the long part. Hear the long part when I say the short part of make a recommendation to the town in our comprehensive plan. So, having said that, are there comments, questions, final comments or questions for Joe about any of the things that he shared with us tonight?
It's Mary. I would like just to thank you, Joe, for giving us some good resources of places we can go and look into, and as we're developing our recommendations. So I really appreciate your time and your candid comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, very much. All right. Well, Joe, thank you. Greatly appreciated. Wes, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, Joe touched on diversity, and I'm surprised that nobody else commented on this. And so I feel as though it's my obligation to do that. It seems as though we've forgotten about the fact that we have a school program where we have international students that come to this community from all over the world. And we've done that for an extended period of time, and we continue to do that in the future. If that's not a marketing disciple, I don't know what is, in terms of diversity and inclusion as part of a marketing effort for this community. And so I'd just like to highlight the fact that nobody's said anything about that, and I feel as though we should put that on the agenda.
All right, thank you. So I certainly think that that we, certainly diversity is a whole conversation that we'll need to get to at some point. We've had it for years, and I think bringing it back into the comprehensive plan will be important. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about in the closing moments about what we talk about next. Kirsten, I see, excuse me, Kirsten, I see you have your hand up.
I was struck by the comment about diversity too, and sort of disheartened by your allusion to some unfortunate experiences. So I just want to say too that, you know, having worked at a college, liberal arts college, and had experience there, I think there's a difference between what international students who are here in a limited capacity for a limited amount of time and being seen to be welcoming to a diverse population, whether they're African American or Asian American, whatever they are. And that's something we need to think about too as we try to market ourselves as open to new population. And I'd be happy, I'd be very interested to have that part of our discussion as we continue here. And I also want to say something else. It seems to me that right now we're really at the last few months have shown us how lucky we are living where we're living, and have also shown us that we can do a lot of things virtually. So I think this is an ideal time to start looking for ways to entice people to where we are. And if you just give them an infrastructure, if you build it, they will come, I think.
Thank you. All right, well, in the last few minutes, I did want to highlight that, and that provides a good segue, both Wes and Kirsten, thank you. We had the other program that I was looking to have us have a speaker next is to get NYSERDA here, and that's the New York State Energy Research Development Corp. NYSERDA is the organization that every time you pay your power bill, some of that money actually in your taxes and fees and levies and all the other mystery stuff that shows up on your bill, some of that actually goes into this organization called NYSERDA, if you are not familiar with it. They do a lot of investment in looking at how we can have an improved power system in our state. That goes from, obviously, the first thing that's going to come to mind is renewables, but they do a lot around energy efficiency and all kinds of other things. So solar is something that we've been talking about. Periodically, it's come up in conversations, and I was trying to get someone from NYSERDA to speak to us, just as Joe has joined us this evening, to talk about what does a transformed power grid in New York State look like, and what does that mean for small rural communities like Newcomb. So I wanted to just kind of check in with people and see if that is an appropriate next speaker. I will be running the dining center for the foreseeable future. So basically, our students leave August 16th, and there is no reasonable scenario that we're going to be able to hire a cook between now and the 16th with a hiring freeze. So I can't hire a cook. That means there is no scenario that I'm able to do any immersive work on writing or anything else for the next, at least for July, for the 2 July meetings, and for likely both August meetings. So I would like to do my best to have speakers that can provide information, background, and ideas and resources for us, and not look at meetings in which I need to do a lot of preparation because I'm just not in a position to get it done for people. So as a starting point, NYSERDA is a group that I can reach out to. We can certainly, picking up on Wes and Kirsten's comments, I can bring in the diversity, any of a number of speakers on diversity. I don't know that we're there yet. I'd like us to have some conversations about diversity first as a group before we figure out who we want to invite in and what we want them to address for us. And I think we need to spend some time with that ourselves first. So based on Joe's comments, and Joe, I might actually put it to you first. Based on the kinds of questions we asked and based on the kinds of things you shared, do you have some recommendations you might say, hey, you know who you should speak with? This is a great suggestion.
I'm skimming right now. I don't know if this is be of interest, but I met, I'll find her name. I want to say she was from Ticonderoga, but it is an example of what I think, Debbie, you prompted in what I was speaking to. This is a, you know, an older person who, if I understand her story right, had really kind of mobilized a group of folks like herself to really drive some substantial investment in their downtown. Like, they'd bought a lot of property. And again, I may be misremembering, but I think part of what they were doing is making that available to younger people to start businesses and live. So I'm going to try to find her name, Paul, and I'll send it over. In case, I realize it's a different scale of community, but it might be of interest.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, good luck with NYSERDA. There's a lot. No, I mean, I think they'd be good. I just mean that it's a big agency with a lot of a lot of people and fairly segmented in my experience in terms of who. But I'll think on it. And then I did want to put in a plug. I mentioned this to Paul yesterday, but I'm guessing some of you have been to or have heard of the Common Ground Alliance summer meetings in the past, and this year's version is July 14th and 15th. It's going to be virtual. And a lot of what we've been talking about tonight is on that agenda. So it would be an opportunity, I think, for you to participate in a similar conversation with folks from all over the Adirondacks, and reading a bit into Paul's comments, if they're, you know, community leaders who you think maybe need to hear more about this from different people, maybe that would be a good thing to encourage them to attend as well. And just because I can't resist on that, I will say most of the work of this type that we have done has not been with the town elected officials. It's been with groups of energized, motivated people who wanted to do something. And what we've seen is that town officials eventually come around when they see something's happening. So for what that's worth, you know, that's how we see change happening a lot.
Well, they always say that elected leaders are actually elected followers, and I think that's largely true.
So, and with that, I want to say thank you to you all. It's always a pleasure, honestly, to hear how you all are wrestling with these issues. And Paul, thank you for the invitation. And if I can be a resource going forward, you know how to find me.
Yeah, Joe, I really appreciate taking the time to be here, and you know, you stayed the entire meeting. I appreciate that, and I appreciate everything that you offered. And I am sorry that CGA will not be in person this year, because I won't have a chance to say hello to you and to Rob.
Yes, well, we'll be in boxes on the screen,
yeah, right.
Just like this. So
yeah, so I did want to finish on what Joe brought up about Common Ground Alliance. This is something that I've attended for a long time. George Cannon and I used to go back and forth about the benefits of going. Wes, you were part of many of those conversations as well. CGA is difficult to attend in some contexts because it's an all-day event, and it was difficult for a wide range of people to make that time available. This year's transition to an online format, I think, really, really alters that landscape. And I want to echo what Joe said and really encourage people to look at it and to consider attending part or all of it. And I certainly think that the conversation this year is consistent with some of the work we did. I mean, we spent, I don't know what, we spent 3 or 4 meetings talking about refugees and resettlement and a variety of things, and creative solutions for how we can think about trying to address the changing demographics of our community. And that's going to be the meat and potatoes of CGA. It's one of the ideas that not just me, but many people suggested to them when they were canvassing what should we talk about this year. So we've had a long-standing relationship with the organizers. It started with our former director Brian Houseel and Zoe Smith. Zoe Smith, I don't know if any of you recognize that name, but she actually just got appointed to the Adirondack Park Agency Board, and in no small part because of her having founded, along with Brian and a former legislator, founding CGA. So it's a good organization. I think this year's topic is one that is overdue, and I think also is going to transform the kinds of conversations that have happened at CGA. been for a long time, and quite frankly, they've gotten kind of long in the tooth. So I think this is a new beginning, and I will send around the invitation. It actually just came out yesterday. I'll send it around to the committee, and I would encourage you to attend. And if you have questions about it, please feel free to reach out. Our next scheduled meeting, if I can get, actually, let me get my calendar. Oh, bless you, if that was someone sneezing. Our next scheduled meeting.
It was George.
Bless you, George. Oh, George, you lurking just out of the screen, you sleaze. Okay. Our next scheduled meeting would, in theory, be July 8th, and we will only have that meeting if I can secure a speaker. All right. Is July 8th okay for everybody? You can just do thumbs up.
Yes. Yes.
All right. And then, if we were to, again, to have a second meeting in July, it would be on July 22nd. And again, that's only going to be if I can line up speakers. And actually what I might do, I'll have to think about this, but if we can get a speaker for the 8th, that would be great. The 14th and the 15th, that interceding week in between meetings, would actually be CGA. And then the 22nd, we actually could have a CGA debrief. So that might be something that we could consider. At any rate, that brings us right to 9 o'clock. As I said, I will send around the CGA invitation. I got it yesterday. Ironically, about 2 minutes after Joe and I were talking, saying, what's going on with CGA? I haven't seen the invitation yet. And it literally came out within the ether of our phone call ending. It was kind of funny. So thank you all for being here. Joe, again, thank you very much. Please say hello to Rob and to David, and we'll look forward to crossing paths with you, hopefully outside of the box, as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
All right, everyone else,
Thank you.
take care. Send me follow-up emails if you have questions.